In this preparation, I will cover those In this presentation, I will cover those who had been utilized by the CPBC in the past many years, a total of 3 current church planting models. The first is traditional, the second is the launch big, and the third is missional incarnational. In covering each model, I will present the main emphasis, elements, and components of each model, the financial costs over the period of the first 5 years of ministry, the type of context that proved to be more fruitful, and the strengths and potential weakness that we are practicing, and available resources helping to describe the model. Obviously, I am not saying this is very possible to plant a church. Furthermore, I am not saying that my description is a perfect one. However, I want to think about ways to plant a church so we can be more faithful and fruitful in the process. Just as it is in any missiological context, from the Philippines to a rural community in the Visayas and Luzon, and the tribal area of Mindanao, and how a church planting is in many ways shaped by the who, when, and where of culture. And over time, that how of church planting has coalesced into certain patterns that we call models when we do missiology. Some different models that has been utilized in CPBC church planting program, and how we might evaluate the present program outlook. I go first with the traditional model. In this introduction, I listed 3 primary models of church planting and outlined some considerations. The challenge is that too many church planters fall in love with a model of church planting before falling in love with the people being reached. They end up disregarding some tools that might fit their contexts. I want to provide some basic information regarding the traditional model. Prior to the mid-1990s, before the church planting boom, before the church planting became mainstream, there were unsung planters like Larry Lewis, author of Church Planter's Handbook, who simply embraced the mantra, go and tell. But you know, the church planting work of CPBC is far ahead than the 90s. If you are a planter, finding the right mobile, you can find the right car, as I have elucidated earlier. In other words, they had a call to fulfill the Great Commission. As a result, they would move to an area with an evangelistic passion to share the gospel with many as they could. Over time, converts made who then become a foundational base of our local churches in the country. That church would start worship, then they had 4 faith families, then they would start Sunday school soon after, and use Sunday school to mobilize the church to reach more people. At the moment, is anyone doing it anyway anymore? In our context, many churches still use and utilize this mode and this model. While this model had lost its appeal as a model of choice for many contemporary planners or planters, it is the most common choice among CPBC churches planting ventures at the early beginning of its endeavor and even now. Why is this model effective among CPBC pioneering work? Let's say you are a church planter in tribal area of Subanin, that is in northern Zamboanga in the south part of the Philippines, who senses a call to plant a church among Subanin in Zamboanga del Norte. You will have an instant connection with many of the Subanin leaders. With that connection, you would have some familiarity with the inhabitants, their background, their customs, their beliefs, their spirituality, which is different from an Ilonggo like me, which can lead to a smoother, more natural, and potentially more receptive transition of sharing the gospel. We usually utilize the locals. There are some pastors who went to seminary at the College of Theology. One pastor went back there and then they trained locals there. And they are working as barangay kapitan, the kagawads, but our leaders there trained them to be the spiritual leaders of the tribe. With that partnership, we start meeting in fellowship hall of the local Subanin tribe people, have 4 families and someone with a guitar. This begins worship. Then Sunday school, then visitation of those who were trained. The church grows and it's soon established, starting a house church. Presently, we have 28 house churches and 11 developed churches in the Subanin areas. Or let you say you are at Tibuli, that is in South Cotabato, still on the north or the south part of Mindanao of the Philippines. Tibuli, who senses a call to plant a church in that area in Mindanao, assuming you are an authentic Tibuli. Now we have 2 graduates now of the College of Theology out from that ministry in Mindanao. You start a small group, then you get 4 families and start worshiping. No large group, no full-time staff, but all volunteers. You start with 4 families, then 10 more, then keep going. With the tradition model, the financial costs are lower than some of the other models. The Anderson has been supporting, the Anderson family has been supporting the ministry for the last 8 years. Many CPBC planters who choose the traditional model are typically self-funded at the first, or bivocational. I said they are community leaders, then was trained as church planters, and then become pastors of their local communities, who over time may come to be fully funded by self-supporting, self-governing church. And we in the office of the convention manage their honorarium and their support of the program. However, some planters may find support from a mother church, a cluster of circuit in that area and in some area of our convention, and to reach this specific group or cluster in that particular area. What about the strengths and weaknesses and the reproducibility of the traditional model? The strength tends to lie in the enthusiastic zeal of the leaders, the planters. Its growth is often supported by the homogeneous focus. I would like to show you that is the Subanin group, and that is the Tibuli group. The two strengths The strength tends to lie in the evangelistic skill. Its growth is often supported by the homogeneous focus. These two strengths become the factors that leads to CPBC church plant successes in tribal area in Mindanao. However, its strength became weakness since the traditional model tends toward a homogeneous group resulting in a narrow vision. 2 years ago, we have envisioned to have church planting among the urban poor of Luzon. Also, many of the CPBC churches in Manila are doing. It is a cell-based, contemporary, seeker-sensitive church, a la Rec Warren. Yet, we face many obstacles. Some of it, residents were embarrassed by their home and did not want cell groups in them. Nobody who could lead in contemporary music session, and people did not care much about nuance of a seeker-sensitive service. Manila Pioneering Venture found that church soon had small groups before church music that were unplugged than contemporary, and straight-up preaching that told it like it was were more effective in that broken environment. The end result, the model was chosen more for the mission, even though it looks like young planters about 2 years to figure out how it should have been done. As we look at the church planting models, I started with a more traditional model. The second model I would like to introduce to us this morning is probably the most used in big CPBC churches in urban areas. The large model. What is this? In the large model, a church planter usually begins with a core or a launch team. In some cases, maybe with a small staff, because we don't have lots of big churches. Most of the time, these team are not that large, but the launch still can be. As they get acclimated to the city or community where they will be planting, they seek to build a core group, numbering somewhere between 20 to 30 people, which will become their launch team. In some cases, where the mother church is large enough to do so, the church planting team is sent out with a launch team. The model was tried once by CPBC during the time of Reverend Herbilia as Director of Mission. Big churches like Bacolod Evangelical Church in Bacolod City, Baptist Center Church in Iloilo City in the mid-80s to the 90s. The University Church in Iloilo City has tried this in the past. In the last First Mission Congress, 5 years ago, Bacolod Cosmopolitan Christian Church, we tried this model and endorsed the harvest to local churches. The church is large enough that they can create a large launch from sending some people, reaching people, new people, starting big. Once a launch team or core group is formed or close being formed, the church hosts a preview service so they can invite people from the community to come and see and hear the message. In the weeks and months leading up to the big launch, the church will host a large event or a series of many events to build awareness of the church and the upcoming launch. With nervous anticipation, the planter and the team praise the hard work will pay off at the launch day. For some practitioner, launch big means that a church would surpass some of the early church growth barriers like the 100 and the 200 person barriers. I skipped two. In the lunch model, where did the lunch model originated? But it's in the paper. Why the popular of the lunch big model is there in the paper. I proceed the upside and the downside of the lunch model. For that's the upside of the lunch model is methodology can work in an event-based, consumeristic, spiritually seeking, church inquisitive culture. As a result, the church can grow quickly. The downside is fourfold. First, the model takes some high-ending funding. You have to fund the rental site, equipment, the staff, the community events, and the marketing tools. This can very costly. Second, you can potentially attempt to grow with the wrong people. This can lead to organizational, structural, and discipleship frustration, which can also lead to a highly turnover rate over the first couple of years. For instance, when we launched in Patnungan, Antique last summer with the 4Ps, it's the government program for the kids and their children. Sure, we reach a lot of people. Most of the people we reach were people and families with a lot of problem and baggages. Well, once again, it is a good thing. Many of them were in no place to serve, minister or disciple another. What ended up happening is that the gathering turned into a group giving endeavor. The sad reality is most launched large church plants never actively plant another church. Some may give financially to the church denomination, to the CPBC, but do not serve as a training and sending church. While there are various factors that contribute to this, the launch big model simply has a low mid reproducibility rate. And finally, fourth, many critique said that the consumerist and anti-theological mechanics used to reach people. As a result, people like Neil Cole would argue what you win them with is what you win them to. And finally, the missional incarnational model. Now, some caveats are needed. I think all churches should be missional. And I think that believers should represent Jesus in an incarnational ways. The truth about the missional incarnational model is that it comes in all different shapes and sizes. Why? Because it seems anyone wants to be missional. Thanks in large part of Princeton theologian and missionologist Darrell Gader and those like him, as evidence of the variety within this model. Craig Van Gilder wrote the book Mapping Out All the Different Missional Branches. The truth about the missional incarnational model is that it comes in all different shapes and sizes. I would like to classify at least branches of the missional church planting approach. We have used this model in our context of CPBC. First, many CPBC churches plant started as traditional missional churches. By the traditional, I mean there will be some form of organization and discipleship programming, as well as some form of structured church governance. While CPBC churches has implemented elements of the traditional model, this is where we would classify some of the ministry efforts. Haro Evangelical Church in Haro, Iloilo City is trying to be. Capiz Christian Church in Rojas City, and a small pioneering church in Pavia, the Carpenter's Way Christian Church, can be classified this way. But my point is this: approach is those whose church plans are primarily focused on missional ministry done in incarnational ways. Most of those churches are similar that traditional missional church, but tend to be smaller and more communal. And of course, even this has degrees and some skewed structures to the point that they are missional incarnational communities, although many in some previous subset also use community language. I have in mind movement like the new monasticism, where people share meals, housing, etc., while in mission. The main elements of this incarnational church plants. Well, there are to be a few strains of missional incarnational church plant models. There are still have some main components and elements in common. First, they desire to incarnate in the community, holding John 1:14 as their banner verse. Missional incarnational church plant seeks to be present in the everyday rhythm of the community. Second, they are highly rational, looking to the early church and seeking how they have favor with all the people. Missional incarnational component seeks to build barriers and to build bridges to the community's people, businesses, and organizations, as well as local governments. Third, they engage in a holistic mission. They seek to be a blessing to the city or community in which they are planted. Thus, they embrace a spiritual, social, and cultural mission. And fourth, they disciple their way into the church by becoming part of the eve and flow of the community. They are seeking and serving and loving the community and establishing relationship with the people of the community. Missional incarnational church plants may have people belong to community before they become followers. But in doing a missional incarnational plants, disciples themselves into being a church. The challenges and the strengths and weaknesses are there in your in my paper, but I would like to end by some recommendations for our church. For our church planting work with the convention. Being with the CPBC for the last 5 years, we could see that there is no grand plan or comprehensive church planting blueprint for the whole convention. So I suggest that we could look on this and try meaning to establish one. Secondly, the financial support is so limited to those who have heart of church planting. With the 11 kasapulanans of the whole convention area, there are only 7 kasapulanans that has program for church planting that is being supported by the missions and evangelization program. Out of the 800 established churches of CPBC, only 30 to 35 are giving to church planting, actively giving. And finally, to establish partnership with IM, International Ministry, to develop overseas mission of church planting, because we were mandated 3 years ago. The CPBC mandated that we will have to reach out to some brothers and sisters outside of the country, starting in Asia and even in other regions later on. So if that partnership could be established, it would be a big lift to the program of church planting with CPBC. Thank you very much. May the Lord continue to bless us.
Okay, thank you. Luciano and Dr. Chetty, whoever wishes to start the conference.
Good morning. Thank you, Pastor Jenkins, for expounding some of these ways in which you're doing church planting. My colleague, Luciano Marquez, will and I be sharing this time together. Luciano is much more indirectly involved in church planting. I am much more overseeing the regional church planting. So I need for you to see how we approach this thing. Thank you, Madam Moderator, Mr. General Secretary of the Convention, national leaders and various pastors, and my colleagues from the United States. I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity to come and share our thoughts in what we do in our region. I also must thank one other person who's not here. He would have been loved to fly with me to come here, Dr. Genaro Diesto. Late Dr. Genaro Diesto, we all fondly call him as Totek. I hired him in 1998 to be the Director of Ministries and Higher Education at USC, and also to consult with us on contextual church planting among Asian America, first generation. So a lot of what he did in developing contextual conversation is in his book that was published. I'm so grateful to you for giving the book to me. The first time I'm looking at the book and not from there. Okay. Does it have any arrow down? And what's this one? Oh, okay, I get it. Thank you. If you have the paper, I think my paper was given to you folks already. One of the things observational, and I want to read this to you. I'm not a formal sense a church planter. My career in ministry began as a university chaplain. Before I was a university chaplain, in 1962, I was a junior executive with the IBM. I left IBM to go into ministry. So you may see some of business mind thinking in my thinking, because my background is much more in the area of finance. However, I directed chaplaincy in University of Southern California, University of California in Los Angeles, and California Institute of Technology. But as a chaplain, every year I routinely developed Bible studies. At the end of June, they all went away. They went home. So next year, I start again fresh. So in a way, I understand the difficulty of church planting, because I used to do it, and I've done it for almost 14 years in universities. I wanted to give you before I go into that, to give you a general context of our region. I'm not talking about American Baptist Churches US of A, because there's no such thing. There's only in paper. What I'm giving you is what we do in our context. The American Baptist Churches of Los Angeles, Southwest, and Hawaii is 280 plus congregations from 115 countries and 45 languages. We are 68% first generation immigrant, which means that our whole mindset is very global most of the time with immigrants, whether they are documented or undocumented. However they arrived, we don't question. The other thing you need to understand, according to our sociologist at the university, life in Los Angeles, in Arizona, and in Las Vegas, in San Francisco, and San Diego, and Hawaii changes between 5 to 8 years. which means the curve peaks about the 6th year, and that community is changing already, which puts us in a massive flux, which means chaos and change we have to become friendly with. I wanted to give you that context. The other context is, and I'm going to now talk you through that. When we began our American Baptist Church Convention began the church planting, it was their plan. They raised the money, they wrote the books, they created the bell curve, and everybody fell in the middle of the bell curve, and those of us in the urban are on the sides. For the most part, all the materials, resources came out of the midsection of the bell curve that fit a very Eurocentric mindset. So we would start a church in Las Vegas. We will begin with an initial investment of about $60,000 for a couple. They will start, and then of course it flourishes. And that's how they started a number of churches. However, by the end of the middle 1980s and the early 90s, we're at 48% death rate, which means a massive amount of wastage of money. And that was the model that I have inherited. So when I first started the process, a full salary package was benefits provided, heavy reliance on marketing and advertising, which is a business model, not organic. Metrics were mainly growth, expansion, and stewardship. Models is very much a bell curve Eurocentric model with very little cultural, ethnic, or lingual or generational asymmetrical realities. Now let me use another term. We're all using different terms here. Asymmetrical reality is the capacity to understand the micro changes that are present in a larger framework of thinking. With the result, you cannot entertain a model. You can only entertain a journey. At the end of the journey, you can say, this journey worked well, therefore this model, we could create a model out of it. And that's a difficult way of looking, and a different way of looking church planting. When I became executive in 1995, we've scrapped this model which we are getting from ABCUSA. Most of the books were outdated, did not fit the Portuguese, did not fit the Karen, did not fit the Chin, didn't fit the Kachin, didn't fit the Tagalog, didn't fit the Visayan. You have all these differences, and it just did not work for us. And so we scrapped it. And I hired 3 consultants, Dr. Gibbs. The other is Dr. Paul Hebert. The third is Alan Hirsch. I asked them to sit with our staff and our church planters to craft asymmetrical asymmetrical journey patterns and navigation patterns to start new faith communities and becoming new faith congregations. We dropped the word new church planting. It's too institutionally connected. So what we did is planting missional and apostolic faith. Now let me use another term, apostolic. Okay? We stopped using the term, we're not new apostles. By the way, I was reading John Stott's book, and John Stott said, in the early church, the church had apostles, but then the church sent apostles. We are 21st century apostolic apostles. So, it's a different mindset. We have to change people to think you're not here as an institutional disciple, you're here as an apostolic discipleship with the passion of the early church. It means if you have not discovered the meaning, purpose, and intensity of the resurrection, you will be telling the story of doctrine and nothing else. And you defend it until you die. So we developed planting missional and apostolic faith community that is regionally imagined with all cultural, linguistic, and generational typology that is embedded in the context. Bivocational missional leaders. By the way, we do not pay full-time salaries, anybody. Something happened. The Lord speaking. Metrics of maturity is based on healthy cell development and their apostolic missional passion. It's not about numbers. It's not about how much money you raise or how much you collect. It's not about baptism. It's about passion. Then, some ministry expenses will be funded by the matrix, which a region is a partner. We did help the cells in some expenses, not salaries. Then we moved from, we developed coaches and mentors. Dr. Fernando Calvajo, for Portuguese mentor, he's a church planter. He now in San Francisco, he planted 5 churches, did an exceptionally good job. Ruben Casas, he's in charge of Latino, he is a church planter. Chris Stong, he's actually a postmodern, multi-ethnic. He's a 3rd generation from Burma. But he actually pastor of a multi-ethnic church in Las Vegas, which includes African American, Asian, Hispanic, and all the groupings, but they all speak English. You know. Kevin Doi is an Asian American, Japanese American, unchurched, post-Christian generation. It's a very different context. Then we have Herman and Zandra Galvez, 1st generation Latino. They're from El Salvador. Then we have Mr. Andy Quint. He's a former executive with DHL company. His primary responsibility, he planted church in Euro-American, multi-ethnic. Dr. Dennis Kasaje from Manila. He's a Filipino pan-South Asian pastor. He developed a congregation from 5 Filipina to now is way over 200, growing in Hollywood. These are our mentors and coaches, which means they work with the church planter, spend a lot of time moving from a cell to a faith community. An average cell or cell life, which a dynamic apostolic leader is about 16 to 18 months, which means by the time the person comes to us, goes through the turning process and say, we want to start a new faith community, we might find a location in a church or in his home, but that person is bivocational. When cell reaches a threshold of 50 plus persons, they become a new faith community. That's when the spending begins, not before that. Which means if the person is unable to sustain leadership and grow, we will immediately know he has not the capacity. Capacity is everything. You don't have the capacity, you have a death rate really high. Regional funding matrix will pick up at least 60% of salary and benefits. In most instances, the new faith community picks up the rest of the cost. The stage will be for a minimum of 3 years, which means we have 1/3 region, 1/3 the church of 50 people, 1/3 from another funding matrix. Hopefully but normally the salary comes up to $45,000 with benefits for a church planter, and we do it for 3 years plus 1 year for unforeseen circumstances. But if the person is not able to go to 100 by 3 years, that's a death rate right there you're looking at. We spend a lot of time with them, folks. They go through 61 workshops in 3 years on various things, and I'll show you all that stuff. I'm sorry. Planting new faith communities is seeding. Seeds, we have very organic model. Seeds produce seeds. You seed them, you plant, you flower, you fruit, and you begin to seed. Sheep begets sheep, not the shepherd. That's a big problem there. Fish beget fish. Go back to Genesis. Fisherman doesn't beget the fish. What we have done, we focus mostly on the fishermen, not on the fish. And that's where we changed dramatically. By the way, our regional death rate is 5.5%. We cut it dramatically, because if they can cut the leadership mustard within the 18 months, they will not progress to the next level. It's a little tough job to call. Formation of cell and regional mentoring teams, nurturing of cells, building leadership capacity for missional planter, nurturing new faith cell, celebration of New Faith Community Plus. When they reach 50 plus, we have a big dinner party. Then they know they are now going to be New Faith Community. They have 3 years to be incorporated and systematically grow and mature and baptize into this. The next level from faith community is birthing New Faith Community, gathering of 50 plus at a suitable location. Funding structure is created for 3 plus 1 year. Mentoring teams and missional planters covenants. We have a lot of covenants with them so that they start bonded with us. Intense training, review, and consultations. Mission reporting process and established. During year 3, the mentoring team will focus on New Faith Community constitution, bylaws, and incorporation. This is where we celebrate, now you're a New Faith Community. One of the things we have tried to do in New Faith Community is restoring the fivefold ministry of the mission of the church. This is from the Ephesians chapter 4. Every church plant, every new church faith community, from cell to new faith community, they try to identify all of this in that community. Therefore, it's not about the pastor. It's about the sheep. The sheep will be, we identify apostle. He's a groundbreaker. He's a guy who goes and talks in a bar, have a beer and say, hey, let's talk about life. By the way, in Manila at the Shangri-La Resort, I went to the bar. No, you can get upset with me because I said, there was a group of businessmen sitting there, young folk, 25, 30 years old maybe. They're all having San Miguel. So I ordered a San Miguel and I went and sat with them. And I said, hey gentlemen, I'm so-and-so. They asked me, what do you do? Well, I work in a religious business organization. I didn't tell them. So I said, what do you do there? Well, it's called, and let me use another word. I said, I'm a CEO. Oh. Then I said, what do you do sometimes? I said, I teach. I'm a coach for the Franklin Covey and leadership training in 7 Habits. Their ears perked up. Wow, I tried to take the course. It's too expensive. Well, we do it very cheap in Los Angeles. We talked, and they all had more than one San Miguel. I had one San Miguel, because that's all I can stomach. But the thing is, I asked them a question. What gives you joy in life? They talked about owning a condominium. They talked about all kinds of stuff. And one guy said, you know, I'd love to have a sense of joy in life, happiness. The whole discussion changed. So I said, how many of you go to church? Or any religious? One guy. The guy that asked the question about joy is the one that goes to church. The whole discussion for the next 2 hours, it's all about life. Beer loosens up conversation. And then evangelists. Some people are gifted in telling the story of the Bible. A pastor is here. He's a soul healer, inspirer. Teacher is light giver. Prophet is a truth teller. We try to explain to the cells, if you can identify early on, you train them, equip them, and move them to a third in 18 months. You now have a group of people that are steeped in the gifts of the Bible, which means the pastor is not toiling all the time. This is a model in which by the way, there are several models. This one talks about shepherding excellence. There are 4 things that we focus on in our region: faithfulness, effectiveness, excellence, thriving option. And each one of them has a matrix like this. So this one talks about excellence. One of the things we try to do is to incorporate the business model of personal excellence management, leadership excellence, thriving organizational management. This is a skill. How the heck do you live and manage in American life? You don't learn this in the seminary because they don't touch this stuff in seminary. Then we move them to what we do talk about, a number of books are written about it, apostolic passion, and that is, how passionate are you about Jesus Christ, the risen Lord? Thriving congregational missional excellence, and that is, how outgoing are you in your context? Renewing congregations, and that is, if there is a congregation that is plateaued, how do we pump life into it or renew it? This is comprehensive congregational excellence management. The same matrix goes to comprehensive congregational effectiveness management. Same thing goes to thriving management. Same thing goes through for faithful management. So there's a lot of workshops in this that my staff works through. My role is to see the big picture. I don't do all these things. They are much more competent than I am. Leadership development for faith communities. I follow a simple model of the New Testament by Suzanne Hawkes, and I wanted to share this. I love this thinking. It says, first, a faith community focuses on God-oriented. God raises leaders. We do not. Therefore, we search for leaders with potential, not potential leaders. Character-focused. The key to a leader's effectiveness is spiritual character formation more than skill, God-focused more than giftedness. Individualized. God uses highly personalized leaders' development process that takes time, patience. Suffering. Now, this is not used in church planting, but let me tell you, when I first left IBM in 1972, I was earning a salary, this is a lot of money in those days, was $38,000. My first job at Temple Baptist Los Angeles, where Totek was a pastor later on, was $100. Free house, free meals, free car. So that $100 is really my dating money. God took care of my needs. Because my father thought I was really crazy to leave IBM. But that was 40 years ago. The thing that's interesting is, if I had not gone through that suffering, let me tell you, it builds character, stability, constancy, capacity to thrive in adversity. And most of the time, we try to take away from church planters, make their life easy. Folks, you don't build integrity of leadership at that point. I know a number of our church planters don't like me saying this. God uses experience, especially trials, suffering, challenges, to develop leaders. Take a look at St. Paul. Take a look at the disciples. Take a look at Abraham. Take a look at Moses. The only guy that had fun, but he failed, was King David. Mentors. God uses older, experienced mentors to develop leaders. Peers. God uses colleagues to develop leaders. In service, God develops leaders while they are leading. Well, that's the end of my story here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shetty. Thank you for your insight in this particular issue. Thank you, Pastor Bañas, who tried in the beginning bringing light to this important issue. I think that one of the most important issues that will really get into our own regions and churches is what we get from this thinking about church planting. Many of the issues that concerns in our denominational structures are important, of course, and all those, but this is precisely what the church is called to do. Reaching people. And of course, there are many different situations in this world today that make us to take different roles in accomplishing this goal. You have the paper I wrote in your books, and I'm gonna just jump from the paper out and in, because some of the things that is in the paper you already listened at from Reverend Bañas and from Dr. Chetty. So I will just try to add something from my own experience. Church planting, pastors, missionaries, planters have been engaged through ages in the fulfillment of the Great Commission given by Jesus to his disciples. Go and preach the gospel. The result of this commandment is that churches have been funding churches in all centuries of the Christian era. All times, all places, all countries, all cultures, all statements of the society, if are Christians, they are planting churches. And I remember what happened in my country of origin many years ago, when there was some kind of division in the Baptist Convention, and the group who was spelled out, they left. And some people were so happy they finally left. I was so sad in that time because I knew that the division was based upon human thinking. But my prophecy in that time for that, my convention was, these people are not with us, but they are Baptists. They are going to plant churches. They are going to grow. And today, this is another convention, very successful in my country of origin, as a result of this. Thanks to the Lord, after many difficulties, they become friends again, and they have good relation, and all belong to the Baptist World Alliance, which is good. But you see, particularly us, Baptists, have in our heart, in our constitutional portion of our faith, give the message to other people. And this always results in new churches, no other way. So there are not really many new models of church planting, because we have been in this business for about two millenniums planting churches. So what is really new in this business is not new. It's the way you do it and the way you reinvent it and will reinvent it. The most models fit into one or more of the following categories. Sometimes the new start travels through different models in search of stability and own identity until they get control of their life. ABC&J has identified these models in the work we do with the movement of our new church development committee. As you see in the paper, I classify 4 groups of models. First is the models based on the initiative of planters, individual or a planting church. Second, models based upon church and organization projects. Third, model based on community needs and social structures. And finally, models that are not new at all, but still in practice, and that have been reinvented over and over again. And we will continue in this way until Jesus Christ comes to pick it up us. Before going to this, I just going to take some of those models. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to say something else. In New Jersey, we don't call it a church planting. Even when we use the word constantly, it's not any committee or any organization for church planting. We call New Church Development Committee. So the Church New Development Committee have a coordinator. This person is trying to put together all the resources we have. The regional pastor, Dr. Spicer, is always in this meeting. He has a very important involvement in all what we do. And the assistant pastor, whether we call associate regional pastor, who are in charge of different areas, are part of this committee. Myself, because I have the Latino area ministry, but also we have the Asian area ministry, and we also have the Haitian area ministry, and others who contribute with us. Not long ago, we included in our committee a pastor, female pastor, originally from Korea. She is a very successful planter. She started a new church in very peculiar conditions, and she really have a lot of success. And she came to our committee, and after a couple of meetings, she came up with an idea that we have been involved in this for so many times, for so many years, we didn't realize. She asked us, what are the committee doing for church planting? So for us, it's obvious we're doing this. So we didn't really decide that we are not doing anything. We are just overseeing, contributing, helping, oriented, giving instruction to those who are doing the church planting. But the committee itself was doing nothing. Okay, is it possible for the committee really do something? Well, I don't know. That's another story. We don't have many resources. We have very limited resources. But really, the most work we do in this church planting is coming from the people who are really planting churches, and we are trying just to help them in what we're trying to do. Another thing that I want to say is that some of the particularities that we have in New Jersey is that most of the churches that we have been planting had to do with community, especially community with a special characteristic like a Latino community, which includes Hispanic and Portuguese, Haitian people, and from Asia, everywhere, mostly Koreans and Filipinos in our region. So we also have new churches among African American community and someone else. So sometimes what we're trying to do is how the area ministry who have to work with these particular groups, trying to help the new churches that are coming up from different reasons, for different ways, some of this according to these models. And of course, as Dr. Chetty mentioned before, the work among immigrants community is one of the sources of most of the new churches we have in our region. Looking into the models, I'm going to go not for all of them, but I want to mention that the model based upon the initiative of planters, the most common in New Jersey is number 3 and number 4. A sponsoring church, mother church. An existing church with a church planting orientation and spirit provide initial leadership and resources, which is sometimes dollars, and or people to get a new church started, including the selection of the church planter and a place to rent or borrow from another church or organization. An example, my own church helped to plant on one of these new churches. How? We found that there's a place where we used to have a small mission that disappeared, because that's what happened with church planting. You plant churches, not always those churches are going to live. Sometimes they become a big church, sometimes totally disappear. So we knew that place was disappearing. And I went to visit the pastor of the Anglo church who had harbored in that group before. And the pastor told me, we never closed the mission. You left. The doors are open. So I found another pastor in our area, said, we can open it again there. You have people to help me up? So 2 churches coming together. Every Sunday, I used to fill my church band and send it over there. Musician people, and the other church have a lay person who was feeling the call for ministry. So both churches put money, people, effort. Today, this is one of the best new groups we have. We already have about 60 regular people working in the city of Freehold. Another model is the collaborative network of partnership. It's pretty similar to this that I mentioned before, with the only difference that sometimes is not the initiative of any pastors, but the region is trying to help and find the opportunity for planter go someplace and do something. In the second category, the model based upon church or organization project, that's what we call the open door church. And this is precisely when a church has an opportunity to say, hey, I have a space. and have a community around us. Will you send somebody to help me up? In New Jersey, we have this contradictory experience with this. In the south part of the state, there are few churches that have come to me, pastors have come to me and say, we have room, just bring in people. But we have groups of people in the north side of New Jersey trying to find a place and they don't find a place. But it's too far for them to go. Or what happened to this group in Freehold not long ago. One day we have a concern about the church have in a transit, in the process, because the pastor move up, retire and move up. So the planter come to me and said, we are very concerned. We don't know if the searching committee and the board are really like us to stay here in this process. So I talked to Dr. Lee, what are we going to do that with this? We have to talk to them. This is a very successful group. We have to keep them there. A few weeks later, Dr. Lee came to me and said, I have a church for you. There was a church outside the city that was declining out to zero, but the property was there. Do you want that building for the church? Well, to tell you the truth, was not really happening because it was too far away of the city. But you see, sometimes there are churches in north side, in the north part of the Jersey, looking for places, and churches that are established say, no, we don't want any group here. That we have too many people. We have too many problems. We don't have you. But sometimes it's the difference. Before finishing, because the time is out, let me tell you that one of the sad way that many of our churches become to the existence is when there are splits, church split. I found that before I came to New Jersey, many of the, well, not many, few of the churches that really start and are good was the result of a split, a division in churches. Well, in that time, the idea was, okay, so you can go together, let's have two churches, and the two churches go there. But this is a very dangerous way to plan church. It could happen, it could be successful, but don't try. I don't recommend you to try that because it could be very, very explosive. Thank you, God bless you, and see you. All right.
Okay, thank you very much. We have actually, because we went a little bit over time, I think we can give ourselves until 10 to 12 for the conversation. So let's start this. First, I'd like to ask the General Secretary if he has some comments to make, and then Pastor Jesse over there, Dr. Narciso.
I'd like to thank the presenters, both the CPBC and the ABC. I'd like to address my observation and comments and certain question to Sam and Dr. Marquez. First, we appreciate that in your region, in relation to church planting, you have mentors and coaches. So you enumerated at least 8 names, no? Persons who mentors and coaches the pastors and church planters in your area. First question I would like to ask, if you have a special training or course given to all church planters in your area, because in our curriculum in the seminary, we don't have a specific subject on church planting. We have evangelism. So there was a proposal before by Dean Ikinia, before our current dean of the seminary, that we have to hold a special training, say a special course on church planting for a period of 2 to 3 months, okay, for that purpose. So I would like to know if you have a training for church planters. Second, how do you tap and identify those coaches and mentors that were utilized by the region? Because I know that this is a very, we know that every ministries that we are involved in is, it depends upon our special gifts, no? Spiritual gifts. So some of us have calling in teaching, preaching, and other ministries. So second, how many percent in your church planting? You enumerated 11 models, Dr. Marquez, or 10. And the last one you mentioned is split model. No? So it's also happening here in the Philippines. So I'd like to know if where this church is located, in urban or in rural areas. Okay. So how many percent of your growth as a result of the split model? And then last, do you have that database in terms of how many percent, no, in terms of additional members, quantity, no? How many people joined a certain church that you have planted, no? So to us, we don't have that data, no? We have, we request our church planters to our director to submit the list, no, of our new members as a result of our church planting program. But that is not so documented, no? So if you can share that information to us, that will greatly help, no, the convention in our endeavor in terms of church planting program.
Okay, thank you
Very much.
thank you for those questions. Whoever.
I have identified 4 questions, so can you ask one at a time?
Yeah. First, do you have a special training, no, or subjects in the seminary for church planters, no, taught by the region, or
I can't speak for others, but at Fuller Seminary and at Talbot Seminary, they are now offering courses exclusively for church planters.
Oh, okay.
However, we partner with 5 church planting institutes. For example, Fresh Expressions UK, Thomas Keller Urban Church Consultations, Purpose Driven, G12 from Columbia, Exponential Church Planting Consultation, World Impact Church Consultation, Urban Youth Workers, Luvas de Gracias from Latin American, Paulo Home Cell Church Consultation. Every one of these provide us with information. And so in a 3-year period, they would go through somewhere between 45 to 50 types of small 2-hour workshops to build skills. What we're looking for is not somebody who is perfect, but somebody who has a capacity to build skills, you know.
In our case in New Jersey, we have a training every year for planters. Planters are committed to go. They're supposed to go to this training. They receive workshops and stuff like that. It was good to mention that American Baptist Church had a few years ago what we call a national church planting institute. I have the opportunity to be one of the facilitators for the Spanish track. And a lot of planters from all over the country take the opportunity with this. This program ended in a moment, but I think that, I don't know how many, but I will tell you that about 200 planters receive capacitation in this church planting institute in Wisconsin in the Green Lake Conference Center.
Okay.
how do you identify mentors and coaches? Are the salaried people or volunteers?
In our region, a church coach or mentor has to have a successful church plant,
Okay.
and they have to have had a growth that's exponential, and we pay for all of their expenses, but not a salary.
Okay.
Which means if I am going to be asking you to talk to a group of church planters on a specific church plant, we would consult with you and covenant with you that we pay like $3,000 or $4,000 to provide these workshops and this type of consultation.
Okay.
It's just on a contract basis. rather than a salary basis.
In our case, what happened is this, as I mentioned before, the associated pastor who had to do with this community, for example, myself was the Latino, the Haitian and the Asian area ministers are the mentors. So we are not paid to be mentors, we are paid for the work we do for the denomination, but we are accomplishing this goal to find the solution for them and help them. Besides this, well, sometimes we ask planters not only to come to our training, but they had to go to other workshops that we have in the region. We have typical workshops that we call COAL, and we have Spanish workshops. We are asking very strongly to planters to come to these workshops and receive training.
Okay. And then third, do you have the database in terms of your number of increase, no? That means statistics-wise, how many % increase every year or every 2 years like that, no? So do you have that record in terms of database, no?
I have record here for the first, from 1998 to 2010. We started, we planted 15 faith communities. All of them, with the exception of 2, are still growing as new faith. They're churches now. We cut the death rate because we decided to do cell first rather than a church plant. And the statistics show, for example, you take, for example, the church in Las Vegas. They began with 19 people. That church is now averaging 370.
From 19.
Yeah, and that pastor is Burmese, third generation Burmese. The congregation is Anglo, Black, and Asian. And you take, for example, the Brazilian church in San Francisco. They have 3 congregations, Spanish, Portuguese, English, and total is about 250. You have one church planter. He began with 30 people. Now the congregation is 890. But they're cell-based. He nurtures only cell leadership. That's his passion. So each cell works, and on Sundays they all come at the church as a congregation. Throughout the week they work in cells. They live in cells. Discipleship, mission, everything happens in cells. So the role of the shepherd is to equip these. I think he has 260 cells. So he trains them on Bible study, leadership skills, and all that.
Yeah, we keep track of this thing because we ask every planter every year they had to submit a report.
A report, yeah.
And in fact, if they don't submit the report, they won't receive any help. So that we know what they're doing, what they're planning, how they growing or not growing. So we keep that track.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you. And last, how many % is the split model in terms of your increase?
Let me tell you the truth. Really, in the 12th year being involved with this work, no one church has been the result of a split. It's that something that happened in the past. But I could tell you a story. For example, a few years ago, a family left my church in Pittsburgh, left, and they joined to another church, not Baptist church. After a while, they had problem in that church, and they returned to me. You are the real pastor. We really miss you. we never had left you because you are a real pastor. We want to come back. You know what? I will find a place for you, so you will have the church that you want to have. And I found a place, and there's today, yes, a new church, and they're working and doing fine. So it was not a split, but what I mentioned the split is because if this happened, and the institution could help to bring peace among the 2 groups, and then you have 2 churches, okay, was good result from something that was wrong, you know. But really, among us, it's not happening now, thanks to the Lord. But the real thing is, in other time, it happened very often. The division brings. We have more churches now. No, you don't have more churches. You have more problems.
In our region, we do not do church planting from church splits. When a church splits, they go through renewal process. It includes a whole lot of confession. It's a whole lot of conflict resolution. It is not a church plant, because the only thing is church planting is fresh, new persons engaging with the apostolic passion of Christ.
Okay, thank you very much. The experience in the Philippines is what? Multiplication by division, no? Okay. We'll have to entertain the last two. But I'd like to say this, Reverend Jensek, since you left the seminary, there is now in the College of Theology, in the curriculum, a church planting subject. And Dr. Narciso is the professor. But I will not let him do his lecture here. So Pastor Jesse and Dr. Narciso, last two comments, please.
I think the presentation of Dr. Sam is a blessing to the recommendation of Reverend Banyas. But I believe that when our churches may hear your presentation, they may be amazed and they will have the appetite to do church planting. But in our region, in Manila, in our conversation, you said that it's okay to have like G12 or other models. But in our experience in Luzon, among the 20 churches, there is one right now using the G12, which became our problem in our fellowship, despite that they are giving the largest ever tithes to the Luzon. But it seems they are separatists. They do not participate in any one of our activities. And I presume that the largest right now in Manila, which has 10,000 worshipers with 7 worship services, using another model, it's D12.
Yeah.
And
J12, yeah.
D12, that's
Yeah.
Discipleship 12. The other one is G12.
Yes.
And I shared to some of my colleagues, if the convention will have our own model, and I will call it J12,
J12.
Jesus 12.
Jesus.
Just maybe jokingly,
Yeah.
but this is necessary nowadays. This is not a question, but it is just a comment because
Okay, thank
your
you.
presentation to Reverend Banyas.
Let me say just a word about G12. I sent about 6 pastors to go to Cali, Colombia for training. However, when they came back, we all sat together and completely redefined G12 to fit the American Baptist ethos in Los Angeles. So it took away some of these autonomous caustic leadership patterns. Today we have 9 churches that are G12, fast-growing churches, and they give to the missions without the separatist mindset, Yeah.
Okay.
We did the same in Jersey. There's a church, a Spanish church, which is very successful. That they took the model and they just make a new scene, and they are progressive, really.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Narciso.
Once again, good morning. Just recently, I have come across a book. I forgot the author of the book, but it is entitled Global Church Planting. And the author points out that just recently there was a survey conducted on who are these people who are actually involved in church planting activities, and it was found out that about 90% of those who are involved in the church planting program all across the globe are lay people.
That's right. That's right.
And I think this is something very serious, because then we begin to ask what kind of churches are being planted. When businessmen, for example, they do it business way, and so we have mega churches, so on and so forth. When religion becomes a business, I think there's a big problem with that. And there could be numerous reasons why lay people are very much involved now in church planting rather than people who have proper seminary training or theological background. So I think this is one very important concern that we really need to address. I'm very happy that in this forum we're not talking so much about models in a way that, sometimes we tend to idealize them, absolutize them. But I'm fascinated with the organic model presented by Dr. Chiti. Sometimes I'm wondering why we use the word plant instead of build, for example, or put up or establish. We establish a church, we put up a church, we build a church. But then from what I have gleaned from the presentation, we use the word plant. I don't know if there is a biblical or theological basis for that, but a plant is expected to grow. A plant is expected to bear fruits, and a plant is expected to reproduce, and that is the kind of churches that we want to plant. But we are very sad to know that many of those churches that were planted before, even here in the Philippines, the survival rate is very minimal. So
Okay,
I
thank
think
you,
this
Dr.
is time
Narciso.
to talk about
End of
that.
lecture. Will Dr. Luciano or Dr. Sam want to just say a little bit about, the comments of Dr. Narciso?
Let me make a comment about just one case. James is a young man, is a graduate of Talbot Seminary, very conservative. His father owns an insurance company in Beverly Hills. He was a vice president of that company. He comes to me one day and he said, I went to seminary, got my education, but I just got tired of church. So I went back to my dad's insurance company, which he earns about $500,000 a year salary. But I have a burning to start a church. Now, I did not tell this in my region, only my president knows about it. The reason is he started a church among the richest people in Hollywood, in Beverly Hills, that either knew or I nor a church will touch. You know where they meet? Cigar and whiskey shops. In the back. He baptized 5 top executives of a company because he goes and sits at the bar, talks to them, and their discussion goes just like Jesus. Now, he will never be in a church. He will always be there all the time, but he is developing what I call a faith hub. And that person has a lot more brilliance about theology. He said, all the stuff I studied in theology, it means nothing. Now I'm learning from these people. How do you talk conversation with people about life? What we have done is we gave them tools to do theological talk. We failed to teach them how to do conversation about life. And that's where the laity teaches us. And this young man is powerful. It's amazing. By the way, just to let you know, they take tithing, okay? Their tithing is really high.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me $50,000 in one Sunday morning worship service to give to 16 churches we constructed in Tacloban. Okay? That money came from a Filipino businessman. He's a Harvard MBA in finance. He was in the worship. He does enjoy cigar. He does enjoy whiskey. But more than that, he came to know Jesus.
We have a similar experience in New Jersey. One of the most successful new churches was planted by a pastor who is one of the most successful planters we have in New Jersey, Reverend Jimenez. But when the church called a pastor, they decided to call a lay person who just joined to the church. This person is a CEO for the BP Corporation, and
petroleum.
Yeah, he fly the whole world, but he have a heart for missions, and he felt the call to be a pastor. Today, this church, who started with about only a dozen people, have about 100 people having meeting every Sunday. So this is a good example also.
Okay. I'm really very sorry. At the end of this roundtable session, I would be the most unpopular person in the way that I have denied some of you, the privilege to talk. But we'll see. I will see what we can do about that, because the General Secretary has a request to make before lunch, and he wants a photo opportunity.